Under the blistering, unforgiving might of the relentless desert sun, the town of Armadillo burns, suffering in silence, stricken down by plague after plague. By 1907, the town is a hotbed for sandstorms and ground zero for a merciless cholera outbreak. The misery here is most certainly biblical, leaving behind an impression of despair and desperation. For were it not the cholera, it was one thing or another in the years leading up to 1907 when we visit here for the first time in the epilogue to Red Dead Redemption 2. But what is the cause of this uncharacteristic high volume of woes for this dying town seemingly on the brink of the abyss? Well, the locals seem to think they're cursed. And I suppose the question is, might they be right? In today's Red Dead Redemption 2 revisit, we're returning to the town of Armadillo. In my previous video on Tumbleweed, I might have alluded to and overindulged in a theory that I plucked out of my backside, a theory I quite liked and wanted to build upon in its own piece of content. So please, grab yourselves a brew, sit back and enjoy The Curse of Armadillo, Revisited. So first we need to evaluate what's wrong with Armadillo, what problems the people here are facing, and just how bad has it gotten, because doing so reveals it's not just a case of cholera, but rather a series of things. Long before we can visit Armadillo in 1899, we can actually read about the town's early struggles. In the Blackwater Ledger number 63, we can read a news article headlined "Death Lurks in the Dust," and it says the following: Scarlet fever rages in Armadillo. Shocking conditions in the city. Scarlet fever exists in this town to an extent that has never been seen before, believed to be due to bad sanitation, though one health official claims it is exacerbated by the high winds and dust storms plaguing the county. The spread of zoonotic diseases has raised great fears. Many households are under quarantine, and those who can are fleeing in droves. Sanitary conditions in the town are deplorable, and the mortality rate is so high that residents have taken to burning bodies. Between the dust storms killing crops and causing starvation and the scarlet fever epidemic, some say Armadillo feels like a cursed town. Travellers are advised to avoid the area. Now we know that outbreak likely began as early as 1898, courtesy of Armadillo being desolate in Red Dead Online set in that year, regardless of whether or not the true purpose of Armadillo being in dire straits at that time is so they didn't have to design it in a better condition for the sake of an online mode. We have an actual paper trail for Armadillo's misfortune dating back almost as far as that, so it's not a stretch. Come the epilogue in 1907, we can read a follow-up newspaper article that demonstrates the town has not taken a turn for the better yet. It's headlined "Cholera Epidemic Rages" and reads as follows: Armadillo under quarantine, scores dead. A severe bout of cholera has broken out in Armadillo, a town still reeling from the brutal scarlet fever epidemic at the turn of the century that left a significant portion of the town dead. Reports indicate that as many as 3 in 4 residents are experiencing symptoms of cholera, including diarrhea and vomiting. Armadillo has been plagued with poor sanitation conditions for many years, adding to the spread of the disease. The town has had such troubles over the years, with pandemics and dust storms, that some refer to the Armadillo curse and warn people to stay away. And sure enough, a simple visit will reveal the town is squarely on its arse.
Plague! We got plague in town! Plague back in town!
The streets are noticeably depopulated. Certain houses are crumbling or burning. There are massive bonfires at either end of the town. The local funeral industry appears to be unable to keep up with the high volumes of death, and the humbly sized town's perimeter is punctuated by mass graves. Corpses can otherwise be found discarded in wagons or simply abandoned in the streets. Those still breathing appear sickly and miserable, with the most affected among the living embodying a rather unnatural deathly visage, and we can watch them helplessly from afar as their bodies fail them. Even the dogs look like they've seen better days, and those who are healthy, or at least appear to be, are packing their bags and leaving as promptly as possible. From the sheriff himself to otherwise ordinary citizens.
I am resigning my post. You will see that I have packed my valise, but the accoutrements of my profession remain in my desk.
Glad I was able to help you out of that, Sheriff. Sad you won't stick around.
Well, so long. I must see about a train.
Hey, what's going on? What's the hurry?
Disease is spreading, sir. It's taking everyone. I get well away from here if I was you.
Well, good luck to you.
And you, sir. Stay clear of town.
Did you feed the horses?
The precious few who seem unimpacted, at least physically, are leaving the dusty town in droves, except for a couple of noteworthy individuals. The town crier, who spends his days walking around Armadillo clamoring on about the plague. Here's what he has to say.
Partner?
Hey, friend. Place is full of cholera. Head in there at your own peril. Well, half the town has died and most of the rest have fled.
Still?
Sure. A few years ago it was the scarlet fever. Then it was the desert plague. Then typhus. Now the cholera. Bad business. Some folks say the whole town is cursed.
Whole town's got cholera!
Here, you can read for yourself.
He gives us a pamphlet so we might educate ourselves on the challenges Armadillo is facing. But most interestingly, in his dialogue, we learn this cholera outbreak is but the latest episode in a series of unfortunate happenings here. And the outbreak of scarlet fever less than a decade prior was but the first. He refers to a desert plague in the interim. For those who are unfamiliar with what that might be, it refers to a swarm of locusts, ravaging the agriculture in the region. He also mentions an outbreak of typhus, another infectious disease, typically transmitted via lice or fleas. Chucking on top the fact the town is routinely battered by dust storms, you can understand just where the rumour of a curse came from. To say this unassuming town has had a rough few years would be a colossal understatement. In fact, it would seem a rough few years would be paradise by comparison to this. Another seemingly okay fellow as far as we can tell is a bloke we can find up at the chapel burning bodies.
These bodies ain't safe to be around.
What's wrong with them? Aside from being dead.
You ain't heard about the cholera plague in Armadillo? Most of the town's either died or up and left.
So, why are you burning them?
It's what the townfolk want. Trying to stop the spread. Terrible business. But lucrative, I have to say.
The death toll is so massive the town has taken to employing outside help to dispose of the bodies as efficiently and cleanly as possible. These poor individuals aren't granted individual graves, they're simply chucked in a hole and set on fire, the last shred of dignity reduced to ash. Finally, there's the general store owner, who appears to be okay. Even infectious diseases can't penetrate this man's hateful body. More on him in a bit. For now, I think it's safe to say the odds of surviving in Armadillo are not in the favour of the average individual. But is the place cursed? I mean, really? I mean, the idea of the place being cursed is brought up simply far too many times.
Some folks say the whole town is cursed.
Folk there calling it a curse.
The game is practically screaming for us to pay attention to that detail. Could it be leading somewhere? Or is Armadillo's misfortune truly just that? However biblical it may seem. But look, this mystery's been around for the best part of 7 years. You know where this is going. Of course there's more. For we must now turn our focus to Armadillo's most popular resident. If we make for the rather depopulated saloon and purchase ourselves an alcoholic beverage, we may instigate a chinwag with a cholera-stricken fellow.
Beer and whiskey's about the only thing left that's safe to drink in this town. I should warn you, I'm sick, but so is pretty much everyone else around here. Apart from that son of a bitch who runs the general store. That might be the cruelest irony of them all. Cholera's a horrible business, mister.
So the locals seem to have taken note of the fact that the owner of the general store, none other than Herbert Moon himself, is unusually unaffected by the disease. To understand why this is a cruel irony, we need to observe interactions with Herbert Moon as seen in Undead Nightmare, the first game's zombie companion story that isn't meant to be taken as canon, but rather a bit of fun. It's unclear to what extent Herbert Moon's attitudes are played up for comedic effect, but nothing in base Red Dead Redemption 1 nor Red Dead Redemption 2 necessarily dispels how he's portrayed here, and to say he's a venomous individual would be quite reasonable. You see, Herbert's dialogue would suggest he more or less hates everyone and everything, and while the intent of that exchange is to make it immediately satisfying to watch him get devoured by zombies, details in Red Dead Redemption 2 make it apparent he's not terribly far removed from that. In other words, he's a horrible man. And yet there could still be dozens if not hundreds of explanations for why he's fine yet the rest of the town is not. But there's a rather peculiar portrait behind him that doesn't leave too much up to the player's imagination. I mean, arguably it leaves a lot to the player's imagination, but in the broad sense it narrows things down fundamentally. And the game draws attention to the portrait with this conversation the first time we enter the store.
Always glad to welcome a new customer. Pomade and soap next to my counter if you're trying to woo one of them diseased folk out there. Pair that with a cigar in the corner, and you're all set.
Who's that?
I don't know. It's just a little portrait somebody gave me once. I always quite liked it. Why?
No reason. Just seemed familiar.
To those in the know, this fellow needs little introduction. The Strange Man is a rather unexplainable entity within the Red Dead universe. He appears to John to test his morality with a series of tasks that can be completed either honourably or dishonourably. He seems to possess impossible knowledge about John Marston, and in their third and final encounter at Beecher's Hope, he pulls off the impossible.
Tell me your damn name and where you know me from.
Well, I know you from Mexico, I know you from back out west. I know you from all over.
Tell me your name or I won't be responsible for my actions.
Oh, but you will. You will be responsible.
This is a fine spot.
See you around, cowboy.
Damn you!
Yes, many have.
This bulletproof, mysterious stranger's portrait appearing in Armadillo is certainly no coincidence. There are plenty of theories circulating regarding the nature of the Strange Man. I've weighed in on 1, 2, or 3. Some believe him to be a manifestation of the Grim Reaper, others the devil, or indeed a simple figment of John's conscience. But to my knowledge there's yet to be a theory that ticks all the boxes. He simply is and cannot be explained. At least not comprehensively. But this portrait in Moon's shop is not the only potential hint towards a strange man linked to Armadillo.
So, not sure you passed through Armadillo at all. Whew. Place like hell on earth these days. Used to be quite a nice little town, too. Now it's just dust storms and disease and death. They taking to burning bodies because they can't bury them fast enough. I mean, when you see it, it really feels like something biblical. And I ain't a religious man. Really, it's a sight to behold. I certainly ain't never read the Bible on account of me not reading and all, but for a place to turn like that, so bad and so fast, you can't help but thinking, this can't be of natural causes. Folk there are calling it a curse. And I ain't a superstitious man, but it's hard not to see it any other way. They're saying this figure appears sometimes there in the distance. Black suit and big top hat, then disappears. Shadowy, like he ain't of this mortal realm. The Reaper and his Sunday best. Maybe they're being punished for sins or something, I don't know. I got enough sins on my tally to figure I'm gonna stay well away from there.
So it seems the Strange Man is watching over this death-stricken town. And if the theory that he's the Grim Reaper holds any merit, that should come as no surprise. But you don't hear anecdotes of this chap watching over everywhere where death is abundant, and a picture of him sits on the shelf behind Herbert Moon's counter in the general store. and Moon appears immune to the diseases that have swept through Armadillo. Is he just really lucky? Does he know something the other townsfolk don't? Or is the strange man somehow inexplicably ensuring that he doesn't get infected? To expand upon this, we'll need to leave Armadillo for a bit and make for the mysterious stranger's swampy cabin in the bayou. Now, you're likely aware that within sits a portrait of the strange man that completes over the course of several visits here. First it begins as an oily mass and then slowly over time becomes a visage of the mysterious man himself. Furthermore, when the painting is complete, you'll see the strange man in the mirror. But he will not be in the corner of the room the mirror suggests he's in. If you turn around, he simply disappears. Then, in one of the many waxy writings on the walls, it says, "I know you," the name of the stranger mission chain in which we encounter him in Red Dead 1. These things are how we know this cabin is connected to the strange man. And within we can indeed find reference to Armadillo. Firstly, on a wall we can read the ominous message, "The moon will shine on in the darkness," clearly a reference to Herbert's immunity. On a small table we can find a map of the town with the following message scrawled next to it: "I offered you happiness, or 2 generations. You made your choice." The question is naturally, what could that mean? Well, Herbert actually has a letter on him which clarifies it. You'll have to either tie him up or non-lethally shoot him in the face to read it, but it's a letter from his daughter Herberta that reads as follows: "Papa, I know you do not like Isaac, and cannot bear that I have sullied your bloodline as you put it, but I beg you to not cut me off as a daughter. I love and respect you, but I also love my husband, even though you consider the cause of blood and selling of groceries to be the purest and best of callings. I feel called to a different path. Isaac and I are dedicating ourselves to helping the poor. I am sure your God will hate me for marrying a Jew, but Isaac is a good man, whatever you may think. Oh, Papa, I pray for you. To the God you believe must hate me, and that he, in his infinite wisdom, can make you see that I am not the sinner you believe me to be. Either way, I love you and hope you will forgive me for this unpardonable sin and come and see your grandchild when it arrives." And that is where happiness departs from 2 generations. Herbert has 2 generations that succeed him, his daughter Herberta and her unnamed grandchild. If the letter is recent, Herberta is pregnant by 1907. So Herbert does have 2 generations, but what he doesn't have is happiness because his daughter left him. Not only that, she built a life for herself that he doesn't approve of, and as a result their relationship is estranged despite Herberta's best efforts to the contrary. Herbert is very much so the architect of his own misery. This also makes it apparent why the strange man might fixate on Moon. In Red Dead 1, in the original encounter, we see him testing the morality of John, a former outlaw. If the Jimmy Brooks poem scratched into a desk in the strange man's cabin is any indication, he does the same for Arthur Morgan, the witness from Blackwater Arthur chases down in Chapter 2, whose life it becomes up to the player to either save or end. So we can establish that the strange man tends to test the moral righteousness of those who have lived less than righteous lives, and doesn't always need to necessarily manifest directly to do so. So it's entirely possible that in his dealings with Herbert Moon, he's never met the man. Hence, when he's asked about who the man is in the portrait behind him, Herbert simply says he doesn't know, but for some strange reason decided to keep the portrait, because he liked it. This is a man who doesn't like anything, although I won't put too much weight on the idea of Herbert Moon being truthful here. After all, how do you explain you've had an interaction with an otherworldly being? So what this means is, on account of his character, the strange man tested Moon, and while I doubt it was binary pass or fail, Herbert Moon is no redeemed character, as he lives estranged from his daughter, his 2 succeeding generations. His daughter left him, and started a life elsewhere, one he does not approve of. He couldn't possibly be otherwise happy. The man lives in hell on earth, and yet it seems he cannot be infected by the plagues that have swept through Armadillo over the past decade. After all, the moon will shine on in the darkness. So what if Armadillo isn't necessarily directly cursed? What if it's collateral damage, and Herbert Moon is the cursed one? Cursed to survive. And that makes you think about why the strange man appears to John, and why he might also take an interest in Arthur Morgan. We know how their journeys end up. The strange man has a fixation on the damned, those whose deaths are coming. and his tests are balancing their moral account after all.
What are you doing here?
My accounts. I'm an accountant.
Is that so?
In a way.
And yet, despite clearly not being a young man, Moon is alive and well. Better yet, he's one of few in Armadillo not suffering. And then, come the events of Red Dead 1, he's still kicking in Armadillo, and everything seems to have reverted to a peaceful, normal state here. He survives the various outbreaks, the misfortune of Armadillo, and by 1911, the town bears no hallmarks of its previous misfortune. So why would the strange man entertain a not doomed man? And why would things revert to normal if nothing on Herbert Moon's side has changed? So what's going on here? How does Armadillo make such a miraculous recovery in such a short time? Is this a supernatural turnaround, or did the town just recover? Considering the strange man's involvement, you could certainly make an argument for both, and considering how limited the pool of information we have on the strange man is, you can make a vast array of things fit. Now, a popular theory to arise out of the whole Armadillo curse saga is the idea of Herbert Moon striking a Faustian pact with the strange man. For those unfamiliar with what a Faustian pact is, it can be better and more colourfully described as a deal with the devil, or an equivalent. So in other words, sacrificing something of immense moral or spiritual value for material benefit. So if we make the tenuous assumption, under the premise we only know so much about the strange man so far as he's an otherworldly entity that we can't understand, that he can somehow offer such bargains, using "I offered you happiness" or 2 generations, "you made your choice" as evidence that one took place, then we can dig into the idea of Herbert Moon and the strange man having such a pact. Moon got 2 generations out of it, his daughter and his yet-to-be-born grandchild, but he can't have happiness, they're estranged. Furthermore, he exists in misery. Not only has his succeeding generation left him, his town is a burning cesspit of rampant disease. Under this strain, his business cannot be thriving. After all, according to Herberta, the cause of blood and selling of groceries is the highest calling to Herbert Moon, and his situation deprives him of stable business and family. Could these be the consequences of a bargain with a crafty entity? One that granted him his desire, the guarantee of the continuation of his bloodline, at the expense of his bloodline opting not to follow in his hateful, selfish footsteps? Well, first we'll need to establish why such a deal might be enticing. So the epilogue to Red Dead Redemption 2 is set in 1907. The main 6 chapters are set in 1899, and we know then the town was grappling with an outbreak of scarlet fever. Now, scarlet fever was a significant health problem at the time, and while it could affect all ages, it had a particular impact on children. We know that by 1907, Herbert Moon has a daughter who's anticipating her first child. For the time, that would put her age somewhere between her late teens and early 20s. Meaning, if we dial back the clock 8-9 years, depending on whether or not you factor Red Dead Online, she was likely a child when scarlet fever was on a madness. What if she was infected with scarlet fever and was on death's door? Herbert Moon's sole heir. His bloodline rested on Herberta surviving. After all, we know now he's cut her out because he doesn't approve of her life choices. So he didn't possess unconditional love for his daughter, simply wanted her to carry on living long enough to continue his bloodline. So the theory thereafter is quite simple. The strange man offers a deal. Herbert Moon could unshackle himself from his selfish ways, walk away. Herberta might die, but one day he'd learn to be happy again. Or he could choose to save her. She'll live long enough to have a child of her own. But while she lives, Armadillo will exist in a state of perpetual suffering. Not caring about anyone in this forsaken town, Herbert Moon would selfishly choose the latter, knowing his blood is immune from whatever misfortune comes the town's way. But of course, such a deal is bound to backfire. Herberta moves away, and the town being a diseased hellhole can't bode well for Herbert's business. His wish is technically fulfilled, or at least it is when Herberta becomes pregnant. But it leaves the town of Armadillo with profound consequences. The question, of course, is why? What if the dire situation of compounding problems the town is facing persists in a tricky way for Herbert Moon's benefit? What I mean by this is Herberta no longer lives here. Herbert Moon no longer has consistent contact with her. What if this was devised as a means for Herbert to know that his daughter was still alive, orchestrated by one with the foresight to know the outcome? To know ahead of time that his daughter will one day leave Armadillo and do stuff that Herbert's misplaced pride and selfishness won't be able to stomach. And that puts a very somber flavour on Armadillo's miraculous recovery by 1911. What if this is the strange man's way of informing Herbert Moon that his daughter no longer lives, whether she did not survive some illness or childbirth? Her child lives. Herbert finally has what he asked, but now he has to live in regrets with no interest in redemption. So Armadillo's revert back to a normal town functioning in a way not too unusual, even all the way out here in the desert, is symbolic of the account being settled. Herbert Moon no longer has to exist in misery to be miserable. His shop may be thriving once again, but he no longer needs a substitute source of misery for his account to be balanced. So now, the consequences of his pact end with him. Now, that's my interpretation off the back of the theory that there is indeed a Faustian pact at play. But it has one small issue. There isn't really anything that suggests the strange man can do that, aside of course from the knowledge that he did offer Herbert Moon a choice, whether directly or indirectly. But let's fall back on what we know about the guy. In his encounters with John, he offers John a choice as well. He deploys his apparent omnipresence to inform John of a series of moral dilemmas, and then suggests he go and intervene.
A friend of mine was drunk as a skunk in the saloon on Thieves' Landing. I think he's going to be unfaithful to his dear wife. Why don't you head over there and see if you can advise him how best to proceed? I hear that an old nun is traveling from the monastery, taking the money she raised to the bank. Why don't you head up there and see if you can lend her a hand? Road's full of thieves. Either that or rob her yourself.
He doesn't make an offer, he just advises John go and make himself useful. Either that or inject his own outlaw chaos into the scenario. His dealing with Arthur Morgan is a lot more obscure, with him not manifesting directly, only observing the outcome of his encounter with Jimmy Brooks. The player can either kill or spare Brooks, and this decision will impact what the poem scratched into the desk in the strange man's cabin will say. So in a way, he evaluates the true morality of Arthur Morgan and John Marston. He doesn't offer them deals to bypass their respective fates, or anything to that effect. He observes. A pact in the sense of how you'd hypothetically make a deal with the devil is a deviation from how he deals with Arthur and John, although how he deals with Arthur and John deviate from each other too. The difference is making an unfavourable pact with Herbert Moon differs significantly from evaluating the morality of two equally doomed men. And we have an anecdotal account of him standing and watching the demise of Armadillo from afar, so we know for certain he has a particular interest in those about to meet their end. He alludes to this being the purpose of his visit at Beecher's Hope, making the following remark about the site that would become John Marston's grave.
This is a fine spot. See you around, cowboy.
So, how could this apply to Armadillo and Herbert Moon? It might imply that Herbert was due to die, prompting a visit from everybody's favourite quizzical top hat wearer. The stranger may very well have offered him his own moral dilemma. Self-centered as he is, Moon may very well have chosen what benefited him, or what he believed would benefit him most. After all, that has a tendency to be vastly different. We know his choices ultimately boiled down to happiness, or 2 generations. But what could that mean? Happiness could very well have been accepting death, seeking redemption, dying a better man than the life he lived. And 2 generations could simply be living to see 2 generations come, his daughter and his daughter's child, albeit through his own prejudices, barred from his own happiness, having failed to learn the value in simply being a good person. Alternatively, this could be about something other than Herbert Moon's own demise. Maybe the strange man injected himself in a dilemma Herbert Moon otherwise faced, one where his selfish proclivities could have had a catastrophic impact on the town, and did, resulting in a lot of deaths that, had Herbert Moon's actions been more benevolent, could have helped avoid. And regardless of whether or not Herbert Moon died a week or 20, 30 years on from that point, it was a moment of profound moral definition for him. What could that have been? Well, consider his position of power in Armadillo, particularly as the town's economy's on the downturn, beginning and ending with him running the general store. Factor that the locals don't seem to have much love for him. I think it's certainly possible Moon could have made Armadillo's situation better, but just isn't doing that. Put yourself in the shoes of a heartless general store owner in a remote town in the desert. It's through you that the town gets the vast majority of its provisions, food, clean water, medicine. So it stands to reason the only logical way locals of this remote outpost of civilization can get essentials is through you. An epidemic of scarlet fever breaks out and suddenly everybody needs medicine. You, holding a local monopoly on the stuff and have no regard for those who can't afford it, can set the price at whatever level you want. A plague of locusts sweeps in and ravages crops. Suddenly, you can hike the prices on food. A cholera epidemic breaks out. Tap into your supply chain to order clean water from elsewhere, and then hoard it, or indeed, sell it for absurd prices. Who's going to stop you? The competition? What competition? Human suffering is profitable. There are very simple ways entirely within Herbert Moon's power, where his selfishness could definitely exacerbate Armadillo's misfortune, make it seem like a curse. So that leads us back to the choice, happiness or 2 generations. In this context, the happiness could come from the joy of giving, from aiding others. He has things they need. He could just give them out, or at least offer them at a discount, or indeed at their ordinary retail price, and be hailed the hero. A local legend renowned for doing his bit to help Armadillo through dark times. Or indeed, he could exclusively look out for number 1, himself, his family. Treat the nightmare on his shop porch as an opportunity for profits. Those who can afford to pay for what they desperately need live, and those who can't die. Over time, more and more residents shift into the latter camp. With one plague after another sweeping through town, Herbert Moon's continued refusal to do the right thing because it's the right thing drives Armadillo further and further into the ground, and this causes his daughter to inevitably leave. Not because she doesn't love him in a way, but because there's no prospect here, and Herbert Moon's firm influence on his bloodline dissipates in the literal distance between himself and his daughter. Meanwhile here, his ways remain unchanged. His arrogance blinds him to his culpability in the slew of tragedies battering this dusty town from all directions. Unable to acknowledge his aggressive policy in wake of all this misfortune is vastly shrieking his pool of customers. He's not the problem in his mind. It's them. Meanwhile, the townsfolk he's got by the balls are unable to depose him. He's a vital link in the supply chain. Without him, Armadillo gets nothing. So I suppose in the metaphorical sense Armadillo is cursed, and that curse's name is Herbert Moon. The strange man may very well not be influencing events here at all. He may simply have somehow highlighted the courses of action Herbert Moon could take for the benefit of himself or for the benefit of Armadillo. Moon's immunity may very well be a result of his ready access to the supplies to keep himself from getting infected, a luxury he refuses to extend to the other residents of Armadillo at a fair price. As for the portrait of the strange man on his shelf, this could just be the result of a test. Maybe the strange man did not appear to Moon directly, much like his dilemma for Arthur Morgan manifested in Jimmy Brooks. So maybe a wanderer came into the shop one day begging for aid, and when Moon declined, he was given this portrait as a reminder of this choice. A warning that when his day of judgment comes, it will be remembered. You see, I'm partial to either of those theories. The one that relies on the presence of a Faustian pact, and the one that doesn't, because while there's no evidence that suggests the strange man is capable of making such pacts, there's also nothing that necessarily demonstrates his limits. People can't even agree on what he's an interpretation of, after all. The strange man's nature is so vaguely delivered, it doesn't give us much room for a conclusive answer as to what's going on here, but it can give us a series of viable explanations. But I'd like to know what you think. Is Armadillo suffering the result of a Faustian pact, a curse, or is it just the fallout from Herbert Moon's moral decisions? And with that, I end today's video there. I'd like to thank you all for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, maybe share the channel with your friends, all that wonderful stuff. It would be massively appreciated. But of course, only do that if you really want to. I'm not in the market of forcing people at gunpoint. But, with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. And until next time, please take care, and goodbye.